here we are in the Title Edge Gallery, which Heidi Zander Caswell or Caswell
Zander.
I always do that. Owns and operates and hangs her work of varied types. And I'm just swinging through the various displays. We're here in Rockport on School Street. Heidi was this year's winner of the Art Adventure Grant, which the Hempel Family Foundation makes possible for NAA members. And she traveled to England in October of this fall. And we're here to learn about what she did while she was on her art adventure. So as I said, we're here with Heidi and Mary Frances from the Hempel Foundation. And I've asked Mary to reflect a little bit on the impetus for the Art Adventure Grant and what it's like for her to come and see Heidi's work as a result of the opportunity that the Hempel Family Foundation provided. So she's reflecting a little bit on that.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And I have to say that really I think it's because of our 12-year relationship with Mass Art and sending those high school kids down to a month in Boston to do their artwork and thinking, I would like to do that, I wish I could do that. And it's just thinking, yeah, adults would probably like to get away like that and do their art as well. And so that's where the grant idea came from, for trying to do a little something to help an artist maybe get out of town or do something they might not otherwise do. But I have to say, thinking about that, I didn't think it would turn into this. I'm blown away by what you've accomplished in your trip and your travels, and very inspirational to me, for sure. I don't know how you get done what you do in 24 hours a day, and if you would please explain that, I would be very happy.
Right, what's
Anyway,
the formula, Heidi?
Yes.
I'm really dedicated. So one of the things was the first night when we got there, I was nervous because I really felt I wanted to come back with a good amount of work to show you, because I really was grateful for the opportunity, because I wouldn't have gone and done it. It didn't pay for everything, but it gave me the impetus, and it was a good chunk of money towards the process. So I just really felt I wanted to accomplish it, and I'm a very determined person, and so I really decided, because I had the two different focuses, and try to figure out a rhythm of how to do that. So just got into a rhythm that we'd get up and we would go see and sketch the monkeys at Monkey World. And one thing I didn't mention is we actually met the two people who were the founders. One of them was Jim Crone, and then his who became his wife Allison, who's also American. He passed on about 7 years ago, and she carries it on. And one of the mornings we got to meet her and talk to her.
Oh,
so that
exciting.
was also really special.
Yes.
But I think I just don't get bogged down. And one of the things I had learned probably about 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, I was talking to another artist, and artists tend to hit a place in their work, in each piece, where they feel like it's not going to work or it won't be okay. And even doing my own workshops with people, why stay in that place? Just accelerate. You know it's going to come up usually, and go through it. And so the first night I was feeling sort of trepidation and, is it going to work? Is it going to happen? And I know it will. In the past it always has worked out. So I think the biggest thing is to just dive in and trust in what you do. And so that's what I did. I just dove in and then just made sure that I was really well organized. So even if I was tired when I got back, I cleaned all my supplies up and made sure they were in the car before we even went to dinner. So the next morning I would be set to go.
Good organization.
Very.
Well, it's clear that even when you're at home, you're generating so much art, which is incredible. So that work ethic just super translated to this location. And I'm thinking, at least you're not at home, you're not throwing dinner in, probably. How it's like, oh, the laundry, oh, I have to hit the grocery store, you'd probably like to eat tonight. How do you do it all the
Normally
time?
it's
Yeah,
really
normally.
hard because I also have an elderly mom who lives next door, and like you say, when I go home, I'm making dinner and nobody else is making dinner. And my life is service driven, meaning I try to do a lot for others. So I also am a reader at our church, so that means every Sunday and one Wednesday a month, and I'm preparing the service. And I'm a board member and the VP now at Rockport Art Association, and
This is all adding up to way more than 24 hours
Right.
per day.
So
Right.
Hard
part
not
of my life
explaining
is
this.
so it's Ask a Busy Woman, and I kind of, what I found is that I kind of listen to an inner voice, and it tells me whether today's the day I go out and paint or whether I need to focus on something, and I'm pretty efficient and flexible to a degree, so that I can just make everything kind of fit in.
I'm thinking that that's part of what I would hope for an art adventure, whatever, just the opportunity to get away for a little time, to maybe get some of those skills where you're not necessarily worrying about the stuff around your home. You came with all of that somehow, knowing that, so that I'm blown away by. But anyway, that's what I guess I would hope for
But
somebody
this
to
really
learn.
did, because even when I used to in the winters go down and be in Florida and help my folks some, and I would go out and paint, but I would always need to finish up by like 3 and then come back and then start cooking.
Elderly like to eat at 3:30. What do you think?
So this really was really the first time I could paint every single day, and that's why it was really good. And what happens is the more you're doing it, at a certain point you do start to lose energy. So it's like I couldn't do it for a month, because at a certain point physically your energy and your mental energy needs to kind of be fed. And that's what was good about going to London and seeing John's, is like I was ready to be fed, and kind of say, okay, I can see those things and how I can translate them. But yeah, it was so nice. And where we stayed, there was a pub around the corner that we could walk to in 2 different directions, and I could be fed.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Literally be
Yeah.
fed.
And in Monkey World, they fed me breakfast,
Yeah.
and that was sort of our meals of the day. And my Sherpa brought me tea in between, or I ate clotted cream. But so it was truly unique in that sense, that I could really focus on it and submerge into it and have a thread.
You sure brought home the bacon here. This is lovely. I enjoyed your work.
Thank you both very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks,
It was
Elena.
wonderful. Sure, at the North Shore at the New Hampshire Art Association. So, what I was able to do, I was able to pack 2 smaller canvases of the same size, face them back to back, 2 larger ones, and then a canvas board. And then there's a new product, which is an oil paper. So I was able to actually really paint on real oil mediums and do 8 true paintings. So the first one I did, the first day that I went out to paint. Sorry.
That's all right.
This one is in Lulworth Cove. So this is part of the Jurassic Coast, which was given that the designation of a World Heritage Site about 5 years ago. And it's directly in the middle of the southern coast of England. And here, pretty much a person is about the size of a little stroke here. So it's very monumental. And because the cliffs are sort of a combination of chalk and other minerals, the water has an unusual color to it, and it kind of glows. So I was prepared for the worst weather, and what happened was most of the days I had just fantastic blue skies and sunlight and shadow.
It was meant to be.
But there was wind. But that was also great. So everything I brought worked out. So I brought a full-fledged wooden easel that was kind of a skeleton I could unpack, and I had a poncho that kept me warm enough. I had a little Sherpa that brought me tea. Actually being able to be in place for a week, 8 days, I was in that one area, place is really important. And then what I tie in with it is my art background, and I have a really rich background of art history and having lived in Europe. So I draw on all these artists I know from the past. And also part of what's my heritage is a painter being from this area, from the North Shore. And a really great thing I found out was my great-great aunt, so my grandfather's aunt, actually painted here on Cape Ann.
Oh my gosh.
And no
that's
one
amazing.
ever really cared or knew about her, but there was a trunk of her work. And at the footsteps of our driveway, which was not family land, she painted, because I have a picture, she painted there, because it looks out to Granite Pier.
Oh my gosh.
And she painted with the movers and shakers, like Meyerowitz. And a lot of people did prints. I have prints that she did. They did etchings of Gloucester, Rockport, Lanesville. She lived in Lanesville in the summer. And there's a painting of her, not by her, she's in it, elderberry wine party with all the women who painted of the day.
Oh, how wonderful.
And it was at her house. So I know she was sort of part of the social
Yes.
netting. So this came out because North Shore had done a show. I found the pamphlet. The painting's actually in the Cape Ann Historical.
Oh.
And then I started to be able to get these threads to put together and realize, kind of who she was and where she was.
Yes.
And she painted abroad too. So I just feel like I have this great parallel to her.
Absolutely. Right.
And so for me, and it's hard to describe it, I always feel like it's really important to have like one hand back into history and respecting it. Somehow retaining that but being original. So that's why I'm always doing a lot of things to try to really be sorting that through and out.
That's wonderful.
What happened was the most reasonable place to stay, which I wanted to stay in anyhow, was a flat that's rented by the Jim Crone Foundation, who are the people who started Monkey World in Dorset. And actually he was an American who went over there, and they found the land, and they started it with one chimpanzee that they rescued from Spain. And now there's over 230 or so. And it's not just chimpanzees. They have several groups of them, and then they have orangutans, and they find who's compatible with each other. And the younger ones that they find that are orphaned in other parts of the world, they try to see who will mother an orphan. And so that's how I found it. Rika was a German orphan from the German Berlin Zoo and became sort of a national celebrity. And from the moment she was born, she was on every newspaper. And so I followed her trip. She was raised for about a month or 6 weeks, just like you would a baby. Humans were sleeping with her, feeding her. And they took and drove her through the Channel and took her to Dorset because they decided that it was best for her to be with others. And they had already had another baby, Bulu Mata, who's a little boy. And the two of them are really brothers and sisters now.
Oh, how
and they're
fun.
quite wonderful. And now they're about 3 years old. So I had seen them when they were about a year and a half. Briefly, I was able to be there 2 days a year and a half ago. And now one of the older orangutans, females, has decided to be sort of a surrogate mother. And she's my new favorite, Osheen. I like to call her Oshine because it sounds like sunshine. And she's, they all have kind of tragic stories before they got there. And so what we did was with the flat, we had access to the grounds for an hour ahead of the general public. And they would give us a breakfast British sandwich and a tea. And we would see them waking up and coming out into their enclosures and leaving their sleeping quarters and coming out. And some of the smaller ones, the capuchins and another one, they really do this kind of howling, almost bird-like sound. So the whole place has this echoing of the sound. So what I did was, as we were eating breakfast, I would do very quick sketches. So that was like the first morning. So the more you do it, the more it becomes sort of. So this was a small capuchin, and they hang by their arms, and then trying to get the personalities. And once you know them, Mimi is the newest baby, and So we would, this was foxed a gibbon. And you could tell that they would kind of recognize you. And what I did was I drew for Mimi and O'Sheen, and they all came and watched me draw through the glass. Very cool.
Oh my God.
Really a wonderful feeling. And I have a picture of that. I could send it to you.
That would be great.
And,
That would be
and so
great.
I was sketching in this book, and they were washing on the other side, their heads right here, because there was like a brick thing that came out. And then when I was done, I turned the book around so they could look at it, and they were also looking at it. That's O'Shine.
Oh,
Wow.
what a face.
That's great. I love
What a
that.
face.
And the funny thing is, a year and a half ago, she must have, yeah. So I was trying to get a sense of, their faces are different. This is Mimi, the new baby. She came from the Moscow Zoo. And
So why was she moved from the zoo?
the mothers reject, a lot of times when they're in captivity, the mothers just will not take care of them.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so they either have to have a human that's dedicated, like they need 7 years of rearing.
Oh.
They're almost like children are. They need to really learn the ropes for about 7
Okay.
years from somebody who will teach it to them. And so if they don't have someone at their facility, and it's really nicer if they have another young one to grow up with.
Mm-hmm.
With Rika and Bulumata,
I love that.
isn't that great?
Yeah, that's a great sketch.
She was braver. Bulumata would let her go test the waters first. They-
Oh,
Isn't he great? That's
Yes.
Fox.
that's great.
We got to know these guys.
We go back every morning. And
Very
Great.
cool. Love
How
that.
they
He's a
hang.
guy, too.
and what
Will
they
you do anything with these sketches?
yeah,
do you think,
I really
Heidi?
want to do a painting, either of O'Shine or one of the other orangutans that I have a good sketch from, because I
Okay.
know the colors and I have some images I could work from.
So what strikes me, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
layperson here, is this and this seem like such different exercises
Mhm.
to me. So I'm kind of wondering about you moving between
and
these
forth?
two moments.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for me, being an artist, part of me being able to paint, it's fine. If I'm sketching, I'm getting my eyes and my mind woken up. It's almost like you'd limber up before you ran. Or,
Okay. Yep.
So, when I'm looking at them and sketching, it's forcing me to see better and to look at shapes and comparisons, how one thing looks compared to another, so I can see something more specifically, because we tend to look at things generically just so we don't exhaust ourselves. That's why when we're in a new place, usually we're more tired. Part of it is just that we're having to sift through more because we don't know what to discard.
Yes.
And for an artist, I think it's the
That's
opposite.
really
We need to unlearn simplifying things and take all the information in, for me, and then use all of that information. So for me, another thing I was thinking was, thought, everyone says, is it Impressionism, is it Expressionism? So my newest thought is it's Symphonism, because it's almost like a symphony. It's allowing everything to come together. There's different instruments in a sense. You've got light, you've got wind, you've got heat. Then you have the different colors, and then also the knowledge of what a place is. So this was the first day, and I must say I was a little nervous. I wanted to have things work out. So I was pleased that I got something going. And then the second day, I went and painted, and it's not here right now, but one that was similar to this, that's on this scale. It's on this size canvas. And these are the cliffs, and I knew I wanted to go there because they just really speak to me, because they're so immense. They minimize sort of human impact. Like it just, nature is so grand there. It's sort of shouting out, and you can't diminish it. It just stands out. So the sketching in the morning was really good, and so I sort of was doing that until about 11:30 in the morning. Already had everything in the trunk of the car, and we'd just drive to the coast, make our way out, and then I would sketch paint until about 4:35.
And could I ask what your Sherpa or husband was doing while you were painting?
My Sherpa would, this is great, because this is like a little path. That actually is a path, that little brown thing.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sitting here,
Uh-huh.
and in one direction is this, and I'm really on the edge. The edge of the cliff is here, straight down, and I'm here. So he was begging me to please
And
focus.
it's windy. Oh
Oh my God.
And I was like, I'm really okay, and he's like, he doesn't like heights too
Oh,
much. I'm like, okay, I'll sit
what a
down.
trooper.
So, I must say, even though I'm not scared of heights, if I got really close to the edge, because I wanted to take a shot looking straight down, there's almost this vortex feeling of a pull. So this, I just find this to feel like it's a creature that's been petrified. It takes about a half hour from where I was to even continue to go down to get to the water's edge. So a person is, again, really like smaller than my fingernail, just a little stroke here. And so I painted this area, and probably around day 5, I painted this one, which is in the opposite direction, but sitting in the exact same spot. And what happens too is that the light really changes a lot from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. So this was the first one. The second one looked similar to this, but it was more this format.
Mm-hmm.
And then we headed inland because I wanted to find something different. I thought if everything's just the cliffs and the water, it won't be as representative of the area. And if it's too familiar, I want to kind of just shake it up a little. So I saw in a guidebook that there was a place called Gold Hill, and it's mentioned by Thomas Hardy. He thought it had one of the best views in, the southern area of England. And so it's all these old stone buildings and cobblestones. The entire village, it's up on a kind of a larger hill and just has these panoramic views. So the other thing I really enjoy about being outside is getting to know people from the area.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this wonderful elderly gentleman I talked with, and a butterfly landed on my easel, and it followed him as he walked away. It was sort of magical. It was like Bojangles, or I don't know. It was wonderful and very sweet, because where I was, this seemed to be sort of a pedestrian of the locals to get down and up to their houses. I had 2 girls who looked like they were from Hogwarts, because all the British girls and boys go to schools with uniforms, so they had their black pleated skirts and their white shirts and their ties, and so we had a long discussion, and I think for them they didn't realize how beautiful where they lived was, because it's where they lived, which is another thing I one of my themes even here is I think sometimes we take for granted, because if we have something so near, it's sort of like, it can't be a good organization if they'd have me as a member. It's sort of like, if I live here, this can't be the most beautiful place. So they said, you came all the way from the United States to paint here. And so they came back twice at least, and they also brought their little brother. So this had a connection to Thomas Hardy. So I think the next day, right a quarter of a mile from where our flat was, which was in a little teeny village, probably a couple hundred people, called Wool. This house was back in a field, and this also I had read up from a guidebook I had found in their little grocery store that Thomas Hardy uses this for one of his scenes in one of his books for the characters. And so I found this, I brought this into, so this was like when I go, oftentimes I'll just try to sketch to see what I feel, what composes in. So like the sketching in the morning feeds into that.
I have to remember that expression, what composes in. That's a good, I may have to title the blog that. What composes in.
Yeah, because the other thing I don't do is I don't edit things out of my paintings. So as much as they look like they're interpretations, if you go back, every chimney's there and it's where it's supposed, where you would find it. And if a rock has a certain profile to it, I make sure that it has that without looking photographic. And there were lots of crows flying around. It was this kind of dark day with a little bit of light. So it was kind of a good day for that architecture, because I felt it just had that older kind of gloomy Heathcliff feeling to me. So then there was truly a gray day, and so in between our little flat and that, there was this large field with sheep in it. And so I went, and it had a river that came around it, and then this house was over there. And so I went and set up in the field, and it was hard because sometimes the sun was coming up and you were getting a little bit of blue, and then sometimes it was going down. And every painting has a story. At some point, there was a sheep about 10 feet away from me, and he wanted to go by where I was painting, but he didn't know if it was okay. And I'm like, it's really okay. And he's standing there going, ah.
That sounds like a real English experience.
So what's great in Britain is, that's somebody's pet. You're allowed to be in people's fields, and they have gates and you can crawl over. And so the last day, because my Sherpa was so good to me, we had spent one day where we just went and hiked. So we had driven about an hour further west, and there, this is an odd story out. This is the area we drove to, Abbotsbury. So they have this piece of land that sticks out. We were on the other side here. This is all kind of coastal inside, brackish water. And abbots lived here, and this is, I think, Catherine's Cathedral. And then when you had sort of the Reformation, all of these places, the abbots were kicked out. But they started a swanery with over 600 swans because they decided they'd be good food.
Oh.
Which I think is a never heard of and strange idea. But they still keep it now as a preserve, which is also an interesting concept. But so we hiked, I would say, for several hours, and we came from the lower side of this and through. You could walk the whole southern coast pretty much. So we came down and went into the swanery, which my husband's a geographer, and so it was interesting that this is geographically, it's the only place like it in Europe because of the water and the holding space and because of the rocks. And what was interesting I found here too, which they had some information on, is the rocks here are like in Rockport, on one of the beaches, we have these high hills of rolled stones, and ours are large, like bigger than a grapefruit, most of them. And theirs were teeny, but they were all rolled and enormously high. You had to walk over them, and then they were completely no sand at all. And part of that is the winds coming in the direction hitting the coast. And so the further it goes into the coast starts to turn, so that the size of the rocks gets bigger as it's getting hit with a 90-degree angle. So that was also interesting to me to just have that. And so the last day, we had been doing something else. That we had gone to Monkey World. I had sketched, and we had done something else in between. Actually, we had gone to a little fudge shop, and I had my first cream tea ever, which I didn't know what it was. You get scones with clotted cream, and then they make you a nice tea. And really, cream tea is eating clotted cream with your tea. So these are cows that are in all of these fields where I was painting, and whenever you're hiking the coast, you're running into them. So it was nice. There was a group of them, and I just set up, and I knew I wanted to get one more painting in because I had that little canvas, and so that was the last painting I was able to do in the group. So those were my pieces. And then what was also, I did a few sketches. So I filled 2 sketchbooks, and then I had done a few in this black one. So these were the cliffs.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
then And then I had seen from the distance, these were cows that were black and white. And it was just sort of the impression of them. They were way up on a hill. The clouds were coming over. And because it's coastal, you get very different effect of clouds. They almost feel like they're hanging from strings. So like they're puffs of cotton. And then when I had first started too from the other end, there's a few, I was trying to get an idea for the monkeys.
It's beautiful. Really striking on the black paper.
Yeah.
I like it on the
So I want to do more with that as well.
Yeah.
Let me pause.
The great thing was, after we finished being in the Dorset area, we drove to London and had planned to be there for 3 days. And what I didn't know ahead of going was that the Jasper Johns show was just opening at the Royal Academy.
Oh.
And so when we were in Dorset, I was able to book tickets, so I knew I'd be able to get in. And I thought, I know his work. I've known it for decades. But what I didn't expect, it was really very special to me. And I'm really looking forward to as things get quieter in this winter. Because what I'm finding now, because I've been painting really since the 70s, is I can really see things that are the thread through my life. And there's things I started in the early 80s. And it's funny because it takes sometimes people like 20 or 30 years to catch up with accepting work. But I'm seeing things there that I really know that I would like to continue with. They're not so much representational, and the Johns really brought that out. And what he does is he's working with symbols, things that everybody can relate to, but they'll have different experiences from. And where he works with numbers, and even just looking through some of my flat files, maybe 10 years ago, and I don't even know anymore. I try to keep some more sketchbooks now where I write down my thoughts so I know what the catalyst was. But I did things with numbers falling like out of the sky, a few things. But he was working with numbers, with faces, even things. He had glasses, I think, that had eyes or a mouth. And his older work, his work of his mature age now, he's still working in Connecticut. He had 4 pieces that were sort of like the 4 stages of life, sort of spring, summer, winter, fall, winter, using the same basic objects or shapes, but then presenting them in different ways he was feeling reflected those stages of life. And also, it showed the depth of his understanding of art history, which I would like to have in the work. So he would use the idea of trompe-l'oeil, sort of representing things. So like even this little beige area, it's a huge painting. We're supposed to be pants hanging. But then different photographs. He had poets that he looked at. And all of it has symbolism. And these vases that he used are the kind where if you look at them as positive, negative space, they're faces. And so for me, it brought up so many ideas, and I started a sketchbook of ideas, written ideas, of using trompe-l'oeil, having things in the actual artwork. And then he's also using the knowledge of that complementary colors vibrate each other. He was using reds and green lines. So it just showed the depth of how you can play with it in something that's non-representational. And it's almost like jazz, riffing on it and giving people understandable objects and then things they don't understand, and then something that's purely visual that you can just look at and enjoy in so many different layers. So he also had pieces where he has things hanging. So it responds to gravity, which is also something I started to explore last year in my conceptual work, the idea of gravity. So some of these pieces, the idea of movement, and then movement being caught in stases, not being allowed to move. And I was looking up the formulas for gravity, and then taking pieces of the formula out. What if you take matter out of the formula for gravity? Different things. So this also, so it's kind of 2 pieces of what I do as an artist. So I really am a plein air painter, but there's a side of me that also has this, wants to play with all of the components of art history. And his work too, which I found really interesting, also is autobiographical. And the piece I have right now in Newburyport at the Art Association is totally autobiographical. Because when I was in college, I was working a lot. I wanted to have pieces that were who am I, sort of where was I coming from. It was putting in phone numbers of my childhood house, or what I was eating up till that point. It was almost like a register of where I had been until a certain point. And also to a degree, where does woman fit in, which is an important thing, and gender acceptance in the art world. So,
do you think the Jasper Johns show presented to you perhaps a way to bring different aspects of your work together in a new format or a new way of representing?
I think it reignited something I was already on that track, but it kind of turned.
Oh, okay.
And it kind of showed me that somebody else was working similarly. That kind of made it feel, it kind of gave it sort of a pat on the back for me. Yeah, these are interesting. So one of the things he talked about is how we remember things. So he wanted to make a sculpture of a flashlight, and they had him in his own words saying, so I went to buy a flashlight like I thought I wanted to make, so I could use it as a model. But when I went, none of the flashlights looked like the one I had in my head. So he's talking about memory too, and how we distort things.
Right.
And so he also was doing sunglasses. So I found that interesting too, how we have a concept of reality that is not exactly what is there.
Accurate.
Yeah, totally.
Necessarily.
That